How do we feel about the Jets at the All-Star break, and what are the biggest storylines heading into the second half? Hey everyone, welcome into another edition of Jets Setting. Rob Wong joined alongside by Scott Billeck and Paul Friesen of the Winnipeg Sun to talk all things Jets. And guys, at the All-Star break, the Jets currently third in the Central Division and one of the best Canadian teams in the NHL this year. Scott, we'll start with you. What grade are you giving Winnipeg for their first half?
Yeah, I mean, third in the Central Division, but third in the NHL in points percentage. To me, it's an A minus. I can't give them a full A because their power play isn't great and their penalty kill has only started to get a little bit better. But definitely, we've coming into this season. If anybody expected this team to be battling for top spot, to be first place at one point in the NHL, in the Central, in the Western Conference, I don't think anybody would have said that. They've played an incredible 5-on-5 game. They're on that 34-game streak, allowing 3 goals or fewer. They went on a 14-game streak of allowing 2 or fewer. They have arguably the best goaltender in the NHL right now, and they've battled through some injuries. They did well without Kyle Connor. They did well with Gabe Vilardi. They've struggled a little bit here going into the All-Star break without Mark Scheifele. I think if you're going to take one guy out of the picture and that would kind of throw a wrench into it, Mark Scheifele would be the guy, and that's kind of shown. So can't give him an A or an A plus, but I'll stick with an A minus on this one.
I've got him at a B plus, which I guess is pretty close to the same thing, but maybe a little less. And for 2 reasons: recent performance. They're 3 games without a win now, but more than that, the special teams, as Scott mentioned, especially the power play. It's cost them some games now, and we kind of knew it would, and it's starting to do that. And this team really, they've scored 148 goals. That's 35 fewer than Dallas. It's 42 fewer than Colorado. Yeah, they've each played 2 more games, but the offense hasn't been there lately, so that's dropped them down from, I would have had them at an A 3 weeks ago, probably, 4 weeks ago. But yeah, I got them at a B plus, which is a pretty healthy grade still.
Yeah, still a pretty successful first half, to say the least. So as we look ahead to the second half, Paul, what do you think are the biggest storylines surrounding this team?
Number one, adversity, how they're going to handle it. And it's kind of looking and starting to peek over the around the corner now and look at them in the face, because they've, like I say, haven't won in 3 games. Is that skid going to continue? And then how do they handle that, right? They're going to go through some tough times, and last year it just folded them. So how are they going to handle when the tough time does come? It's a common storyline now to say that the play in the NHL, the level of play cranks up after the All-Star break. Can the Jets crank it up another notch? They seem to be tailing off a little bit lately, so that's something to watch. Can they keep up this incredible defensive show? Number 1 in the league in goals against, which is more important than being number 1 in the league in goals for. Can they keep up that incredible team defensive play? Now, maybe you could argue that they've shown enough now that it's entrenched, but I can't get last year out of my mind still. I know it's a different year and everything else, but can they keep it up? Can they establish the top line that they've kind of envisioned now for so long, with Mark Scheifele between Kyle Connor and Gabe Vilardi? Is that finally going to happen, and what's it going to look like? So that's, to me, a storyline to watch. And then the big one, what are they at the trade deadline? Are they rolling? Are they aggressive buyers? Have they faded? Are there some bigger question marks? Do they not become buyers? They should still at this point. Yeah, they're third in their division, but points percentage-wise, they're number 1. But that could easily change. Now, I don't think being third in the division is going to be good enough. That shouldn't be the goal here. They should be top of division and really rolling once trade deadline comes along. And that's just over a month away now. So that's, to me, a big part of the second half storyline is what are they and what will they try to become when March 9th, I think it is, approaches.
Yeah, March 8th for the trade deadline. And third in the division, we'll go with that. They're also 2 games in hand, and they're only 2 points out of first place. So I'm not going to hold against them that they're third in the division at the All-Star break with 2 games in hand, because I think this team has shown, quite well that it can win more games than it loses. They are in a funk right now, and that will be the storyline coming out of the break. They've lost look, they've lost 3 straight is basically what the thing is. It's 0-2-1, and they've lost 4 of their last 6 coming into it with Mark Scheifele out of the lineup. So, is Mark Scheifele healthy coming back out of the break? I mean, that's probably the biggest storyline. Immediate one is Mark Scheifele ready to return to the lineup? And if so, they're going to have Kyle Connor, and as Paul said, Kyle Connor and Gabe Vilardi as likely the top line. We'll see kind of what happens here. To me, the biggest storyline overall, though, is how this team handles the trade deadline. Like, this is we've already seen the first team strike. The Vancouver Canucks went out on Wednesday and landed the best center that was available on all these trade bait boards in Elias Lindholm. They paid a lot for him. For me, he was the top guy available for the Jets too. The Jets need a second line center in my mind. They need somebody, as an insurance policy for Mark Scheifele if he's injured. We saw this in the bubble back in 2020. They lost Mark Scheifele in that series, and that didn't help them, obviously. We saw it the year after that when they played Montreal in the second round, and Mark Scheifele drilled Jake Evans and was suspended for 4 games, and the Jets lost 4 straight in that series, and that was it. We saw it in Game 5 last year against the Vegas Golden Knights, where Mark Scheifele wasn't in the game, injured again. And conversely, we saw in 2018 how dominant Mark Scheifele was when healthy in the playoffs, and how good he was, historically good, if we go back and look at it. So, to me, it's how they handle this trade deadline, because that's the biggest thing. Can they identify the problems that are starting to creep into their game now, as Paul has alluded to? Because I think we can see that this team not only needs a second-line center, they need help on the power play, and they might need a depth defenseman as well going forward here. So how does this team, who has often not been willing to, let's say, push everything in to try and win it, if this team in a month's time is around the top of the Central, this is going to be an arms race, and so I think that's probably the biggest storyline. And with subplots like, how do they handle the adversity? Can they keep up the 5-on-5 play? They're 47 games in. I think we can say this is what this team is. I'm not as quick to kind of worry about last year, because I think 2 of the big problems of last year aren't in Winnipeg any longer. That being said, what happens if this team goes on 3 or 4? Well, they're already on 3 games. If they lose 4 or 5, maybe 6 in a row. We've seen it with teams like Vegas this year. We saw it with Vancouver a little bit, and losing a little bit. We saw what's happening with the Los Angeles Kings right now, how far they've fallen. Ironically, with one of the former Jets on their team. So it's kind of interesting to see how that's going to play out. But I think the Jets are in really good position here. They've bought themselves some time and some favor, let's say, given how well they've played. But yeah, for me, it's just, we're just over a month away from the trade deadline, and it's already started. And so what happens? The first domino, let's say, fell on Wednesday with Lindholm, and now it's kind of a race to see if the Jets can kind of fill and plug the holes and make their team better.
Scott raises a good point. The trade deadline, we all think of it as March 9th. Maybe it's begun already. And maybe Kevin Cheveldayoff should be the kind of guy that strikes early. And I sense, I think he has in the past. He's made moves before that deadline comes along. Because at deadline, you're really pushed to pay a maximum price, right? You're competing with a lot of teams that are in the same boat. Now, boy, you could argue Vancouver paid a maximum price to get what they got too from Calgary. But yeah, and maybe it starts now. Maybe from now till March 9th is trade watch time for the Jets to see because they have an obvious need at second line center. I think that's really obvious. They got to fill it. I think it's safe to say. So that'll be very.
Yeah, and the other thing is, does Kevin Cheveldayoff have another Paul Stastny in him, right? Paul Stastny came out of nowhere in 2018. He had a no movement clause. He had, there was no reason for Paul Stastny to be coming to Winnipeg, and there he was in a Winnipeg Jets shirt, helping this team to the Western Conference Final in a huge part. And guess where that position was? Second line center, which has been a problem probably for this team ever since they lost. Even when they had Brian Little, they were trying to replace him, or at least shore up that position and that depth and the thing. Now they don't have a bone. And full credit to Vlad Nemestikov. He's played really well, but I think they need a faster, perhaps a little more productive second line center right now that also can play maybe, well, for sure power play, and if ideally win faceoffs, which is another thing, and play maybe a little bit of PK. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think second line center is where they got to go.
A year ago at this time, Rob, didn't we think that player was here, Pierre-Luc Dubois, right? We really thought, boy, what a perfect second line center. Maybe even number one, we thought. Young, powerful, hands. Something missing there, though.
Yeah, definitely one of the big needs for this Jets team, and we'll see if they can fill that hole before the trade deadline. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments section below or send us an email at winnipegjets@postmedia.com. For Scott Billeck and Paul Friesen, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.